Our guest on Free Your Inner Guru this week is Charles Wilson. Charles, I'm so excited to introduce you to the Free Your Inner Guru family
Wow.
and tell the story together of how we met. But first, I just want to welcome you on here.
Thank, thank you so much. Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, you and I both started on a creative journey
hmm
earlier in the year.
hmm
And it's even to frame it up for people listening to our conversation. This journey was in a workshop called the Creative Workshop with,
hmm
it was a first run of a workshop by Seth Godin,
hmm
who I've been taking a number of his courses over the course of the last year and a half.
hmm
And probably what's most relevant is to share that this course started around February 1st, maybe February 8th, but it
Right.
was before the pandemic
hmm
hit.
Right.
And so before we describe what that course was like and the experience, I'm very curious about what caused you to join and become a part of that environment where we ended up eventually meeting.
Well, it's a very interesting story. My publisher, he asked me, I say maybe November of last year. We had a great conversation. And he says to me that he wanted me to do a solo piano album. At the time, I had no idea what that meant because I have been playing with bands and playing with, I use MIDI gear and make beats and everything. So I'm like by myself. Why would I want to be alone? But around February, early in the workshop, um, I went to LA to do some writing, and maybe the second day of me writing, he sent me a quote by Seth Godin. And I said, wow, that's super interesting. It's really, really good. He says, well, Seth is doing this workshop thing. Do you want to join? Uh, yeah, what's it about? He says, well, it's 100-day commitment to writing. He said, so what you're working on right now, you'll be committed to do it for 100 days. And I said, yes, I'll do it. He says, you pay $1, I'll pay the rest of your tuition. Don't worry about it, but you have to be committed. I mean, he said it like 5 times. Are you going to do it, dude? Are you going to stick to it? I said, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stick to it. So more than anything, I had an extreme amount of accountability walking into it. And the next day I joined and the journey started.
So to kind of show where things became intertwined, in January, I resolved that this would be the year that I finally sat down and wrote my book. And my book is, as I would uncover through this whole conversation about genre in the workshop,
Right.
it the way the how I've categorized it is it's a self-helpy memoir.
Oh, wow.
And so it's not advice, it's
Mm-hmm.
writing the story of my life experience, which is a pretty lofty thought and intimidating thought to begin
Mm-hmm.
with. And 5 years ago, I took a course on autobiographical writing. I knew I had some stories I wanted to tell. And for 5 years, I've been plugging away, intermittently writing, but never with any kind of commitment.
Right.
So at the same time as your publisher was speaking to you, I was receiving the emails about this course. And it was almost like the universe was saying to you, oh, you're really going to write this?
Right.
You know, and dripping this into my inbox.
Right.
So we get onto this platform. We start on a journey of creating what we're going to create. So I'm writing, and I jumped right into a couple of the most difficult chapters to write.
Mm-hmm.
And you at the same time, we hadn't seen each other's work yet. You at the same time started composing music of a very different genre to
Mm-hmm.
what you've been performing. And I think
Right.
right now is when I would like to introduce the everyone to what I discovered in being a bit of a discourse sleuth, checking people out when I saw what they were doing. I
Right.
tracked you down online. You weren't the easiest to track down at the time,
Yeah.
but I was looking at, okay, so there's a few piano players out there named Charles Wilson.
Hmm.
Which Charles Wilson am I looking at? It's certainly not the Canadian man who lived, 40,
No,
50 years ago.
no.
And then I narrowed in on you and I was like, what? Who
Yeah.
am I in this workshop with? So could you give us a little bit of, and it's impossible to do without name dropping. You haven't
Right.
just been playing around in bands, you've
Right.
been playing in bands with Justin Timberlake,
Yeah.
Rhianna,
Yeah.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
So at the top of that field. So
Mhm.
can you give us a bit, but that's not where you started. So can
No.
you give us a bit of a journey from your roots in
Hmm.
classical music with your family
Right.
up to the moment where your publisher is saying, I want you to go over here
Right.
now?
Okay. Well, I started out age 3, and my classical instructor, his name was Thomas Schwartz, and he was super tough. And he and my mom had a pact that they made that, you know, her children were going to play music up until age 18. We were going to study classical music, and after 18, you could kind of do what you wanted to do, but that was the deadline, the marker. So I studied and competed all through my childhood up into high school. Went to college for music, and then went to another college for engineering. And after graduating from the engineering school, I got offered the gig with Justin Timberlake, and it just kind of all unfolded from that point. Uh, JT was the first gig. Backstreet Boys was the second. Rhianna third. John Mayer. Back to Rhianna. Back to Justin. Back to Rhianna. I was musical director for Rhianna. I was musical director for Demi Lovato. And then the last tour I did was called Michael Jackson Immortal, and that was in 2014. And um, it was amazing and life changing. And I also worked as a producer for Timbaland, and did a bunch of hip hop and R&B and things of that sort. And like I said, to get to this point and kind of say, okay, all the way back to the beginning. So back to classical music, so it's been a great journey. It's been exciting, very exciting, um, to share the stage with some of the world's greatest talent. Um,
What would you say from that? I'm sitting here, anyone who sees this on YouTube eventually, I'm shaking my head because
mhm.
that's quite the auspicious start to a career, to come right out
Yeah.
and and drop in at that level. Because if I'm correct in my thinking, those were some of the years where Justin Timberlake was, re-emerging or peaking
Yeah.
on the pop scene as a very different. And there's a whole story about him here in Toronto. He
Mhm.
came to town
Mhm.
as part of the SARS concert in had to be 2002.
I was there. It was massive. It
I
was
did not know
massive.
this. You were
Yes,
there.
I was there.
So was I.
Yes, that concert was amazing. It was so many people. It was one of those amazing things.
it it was amazing, and some of it was amazing in not such a great way,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
oh my gosh, so now we have to talk about this. I have a huge
Yes.
long list. We might be on here for days. And I have no list. We're just going with the flow here. um but okay, that is crazy, because at that time in my life, I had
Mhm.
just left the corporate life. So my background, I was a teacher, then a corporate trainer, then I was in sales for a few years, and fell out hard with my boss and ended
Mhm.
up leaving that company, and started my own consulting business. So
Mhm.
right in early 2002, that's why I was able to, or 2003, I was able to pick that date, because I started my company and I was independent, and suddenly SARS hit Toronto. I was
Mhm.
working in the automotive industry, one client, and we had a very localized recession, because the city was paralyzed by
Right.
fear, economics, travel, everything. Just the shit hit the fan. So I think
Right.
people can relate to that in terms of the shit has hit the fan pandemic wise, in a very similar way, but globally
Yeah.
now. So
Right.
you come into town on that tour.
Mhm.
So we have an idea of the timing. it's the Stones. They're coming to Toronto.
Yep.
They are traveling with AC/DC, and
Uh-huh.
um, I was actually posting about this online for more recently, because an interview with him with Justin Timberlake on the Graham Norton show about what happened when little Poppy JT comes out onto the
That's a
stage with
stage.
this hardcore rock metal audience. They didn't treat you guys all that well.
No, they didn't. We were ducking things being thrown at us. The whole show, I mean, I ducked everything that you could think of: water bottles, baby diapers, a mustard bottle. There was mustard all over my keyboards. I mean, those hardcore rock fans threw everything they could at us. And we just did our show. We did our thing.
Yeah, he kept going.
Yeah, it
I was
kept going.
there. So
Mm-hmm.
I was there. I was watching this. I was mortified. And I want to apologize to all of Toronto right now, but I'm not going to. This was
Yeah.
not a finest moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some fine things came out of that that day, including the ability to tell the story on a broader stage. And it was very much a character moment, I think, probably for all of you, although the focus was on, he was the target of
Absolutely.
apparently not just bottles of water, but bottles of
Yeah.
urine.
Urine. Yes.
Yep.
All of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
bad.
there's a proving ground, I think, out
Mm-hmm.
there for
Yeah.
artists. What did you learn, just to bring it back up to big picture before we dive into more present times? You're coming out into your music career early. You're at that sort of level of visibility, and obviously a top performer in the field, surrounded by other top performers. What were some of the most salient lessons of that time?
Um, the good lessons were, I guess, everything that I had learned up into that point had now had a use. Not only, I always talk about touring and I say, well, being on stage and actually performing is the small part of touring. You spend 2 hours on stage and that's it. You have a whole rest of a day where you have to be around these people and operate within a family environment. So that's why I always say a lot of musicians, there are a lot of great musicians, but not all are made to tour, because a lot don't understand, that fine line that you walk when you're, the brotherhood, the sisterhood that you have to create and establish and maintain within this group. You're out with another 100, maybe 150 people. So it's very important to understand, the family dynamic and where you fit into this family dynamic while you're on tour with this group. As far as music, it was just, everything that I had studied kind of all into one thing. I remember the first day I met Justin, he asked me to play for him, and I played Beethoven Sonata or something. And he was just completely blown away. And he asked me, he said, dude, how old are you? I'm 21. He's like, dude, you play like a 50-year-old. So, those things kind of came into play later on, especially my skill in arranging, my skill at theory, and so many other things. I was able to use those things and help other people in the band, like, to understand things. Very much helping the musical director and the whole creation come together. So everything I had learned had just kind of like, now's that moment.
I love that. It's like this full integration of, right from get go,
Yeah.
with what your parents, with your mom in
Right.
particular, wanted
Yeah.
for you. Was she a musician? Is she a musician?
She is a musician. She comes from that's the musical side of my family, is my mother's family. She's a flautist, and I have an uncle who's also a saxophonist, another one who's a singer, another one who is a tap dancer. So all the entertainers are from my mother's side.
And before we jump into the piece, talking about the piece that you wrote,
Yeah.
named for your mother and wrote for your
Mm-hmm.
mother,
Mm-hmm.
let's share a little bit of what was it like for you now, all these years later, being put back into writing and composing classical music now,
Mm-hmm.
and then doing it in this semi-public environment. And just so to give a bit of an idea, the idea was that in conjunction with going through some content,
Mm-hmm.
like a program we were in a feed. We each had our own daily feed where every day for 100 days, we were to show up and ship something.
Right.
And and then tagging each other, very much picture like a closed social media environment where there's hundreds of people there,
Right.
and you're tagging people as part of a cohort, and then connecting online with each other. So you end up
Mhm.
starting to, I was tagging you in some of my work,
Mhm.
and ended up being tagged in some of yours, and then you kind of hit your regular channels where you go check in whether you're tagged or not.
Right.
So this, this community sense of creativity is building, but
Mhm.
it wasn't behind closed doors, not by any means.
No, no, not at all. It's completely public.
How
And
did you find that? It was so different because I was like, oh my God, he's writing music right in front of my eyes.
yeah, at
You know?
first, terrifying, terrifying at first. Like I couldn't believe that I had to share these days of writing these little, these. I'd spend hours working on something, and it would only be like 37 seconds. And I'm like, these people are going to be like, oh, he's a loser. Like, he doesn't. So at first, it was extremely terrifying and intimidating. But as I kept posting and shipping every day, the love kind of poured in. And people were saying, wow, this is great. Keep going. And the community very much helped me to learn my process, to learn how and what ways are the best way for me to write and to ship as well.
Yeah, and in that environment, ship means pretty much to show, to
Yeah.
publish it somewhere. And I have to sort of call myself out. Um, Unlike you, were you 100 days consecutive? Were you
I
in
was
there 100?
100. Yeah, I was 100 days consecutive.
Oh, you're a warrior, man.
So
Um,
difficult.
and so my world got a little chaotic.
Mhm.
So I jumped right in the beginning, as I often do, full on. I start writing about my first story I wrote was the time I shaved my head at a spiritual retreat. So like
Wow.
no context, I just dove right in. It was something I needed to get out, and I, like you, had people, gravitating towards it, really
Mhm.
enthralled, and was building a community around the work.
Mhm.
And then we went on vacation.
Mhm.
Lucky us, let me tell you.
Mhm.
We went on
Yeah.
vacation the last week of February, the first week of March. So that was hard to be present for my vacation, but I still
Right.
had my iPad out most days and I was putting
Mhm.
something in there. When I
Right.
came home, I got an eye infection and it knocked me out.
Wow. Wow.
But so pandemic,
Mhm.
job loss, like it was
Mhm.
chaotic here. But
Yeah.
I've got to tell you that even though I didn't hit every single day,
Mhm.
I was in there every day.
Right.
I was writing to other people every day. I was blogging, I was podcasting, I was shipping something every single day, just not my own writing. So
Right.
I fell behind.
Mhm.
And the thing that I enjoyed the most about your journey, because it was one of the most visible every single day ones that I saw,
Mhm.
where your work, you were inspiring me on days where I was either feeling unwell or in a lot of pain,
Mhm.
trying to sort out something non-COVID in the middle of the pandemic was virtually
Right.
impossible.
Yeah.
That work kept me, you are among the people whose work kept me going and moving forward.
Oh,
And that
that's
never would have
great.
happened.
Oh, that's great to know. That is so great to know. Yeah. And likewise, like everyone's work ethic in there and everyone showing up and shipping, it's just, I felt a sense of like accountability. There were people who would say, "Oh, I wake up and I have my coffee and I listen to your dailies." So at this point, I'm in the frame of mind where, okay, I'm very tired. I'm exhausted. My day is over. You know, it's 1 a.m. I'm exhausted. I should go to sleep. But no, I'm gonna spend that 15 minutes, that 20 minutes, and make sure that whoever wakes up and has their coffee, they have something to listen to. So it just became that sensibility of there's an audience and I have to make sure that the audience has what they need. So that's kind of just the driving force that kept me going was the people in the workshop that,
And you would, like you said, you would put, the 20, 30 seconds of what you were working on
hmm
into your channel, for lack of a better word,
hmm
or into your dailies, and you would editorialize a little bit. You would say, I worked on the end of this today, or today
right.
was a great day, today
Today was a
not
terrible one.
oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But piece by piece, you wrote a 12-track album in 100
hmm
days
Yeah.
of
Yep.
classical
100
music, like not
classical music.
little ditties.
Yeah. Yeah. 107 days. 107 days to be specific. Yeah.
Tell us about Kandi's Waltz.
Oh, Cookie Waltz.
Cookie,
Yes.
sorry. I
Cookies
think you
Waltz.
can edit
Yes.
that out. Cookies Waltz.
So,
I didn't.
so yeah. So Cookie is my mom's nickname. And it's a waltz because, when I was a little kid, my mom used to have us stand on her feet, and she was super into musicals, and she would just put on something and she would just waltz us around the room. And as we got older, she would, just, if she felt like dancing, she would just grab me or my sister and just start waltzing, and she taught us how to dance. So I felt no better way to pay tribute to my mother than to write a waltz for her. And something very happy and uplifting, and just something that reminds me of that time. Also, my mother now lives with my sister and her grandchildren, and this is the song that she'll teach my nieces and nephews what she taught us. So this is kind of like a generational thing. And also for my sister, I sent it to her and I said, now you get to teach them what mom taught us. So it was like an honor to do this song. It's so amazing.
I'm melting listening to this, and
Yeah.
when you were writing it, what it was reminiscent of for me is my grandfather. My grandparents on my dad's side are Czechoslovakian, and my grandfather liked to waltz, and they took care of me in their home when my mom went back to work, and he would waltz in the living room, very much like that. And
Exactly.
just to have that, it was very nostalgic,
Mhm.
but also illuminating that a new, like, waltzing it's old.
Yeah,
Classical
it's
music
so
is
old.
old.
Yeah.
And yet a new waltz can be created.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Uh,
magical.
yeah.
So in and around the 100 days,
Mhm.
society shifted again.
Yes. Massive shift.
And and George Floyd was killed.
Mhm.
And you had completed your 12-track album,
Mhm.
and then you got another request from your publisher.
Yes. He called and we had a conversation, and he said, I need one more. And I sighed very big and I said, what's up? And he says, I need a George Floyd piece. He says, I need to know, I need to hear your voice over this topic. You need to tell me and everyone how you feel about this. And honestly, this piece has been one of the most emotionally, I want to say draining, but draining is not the right word, because it has been draining, but it has been also emotionally, I've discovered things and more things about myself, and being able to tell my version of the story and my version of how I feel in my own way. I've been protesting. This piece has been my own protest, saying that, as an African American man in this country who has experienced, uh, racial bias my whole life, this is my way of saying, you know, I'm angry about these things, but I'm also sad about these things, but also have hope for these things. But then I lose my hope because I know the history, and the history hasn't changed, but the history must change. So this swaying emotions, every time I sit down to write this piece or put more work into it, it's just like going down the rabbit hole. and sometimes it was very, very emotional, and I would have to take days and just kind of regroup myself and say, okay, you know what? Yes, that hurts, but you have to tell people how it hurts you, and this is your voice. So I'm happy to say the piece was finished hours ago.
Literally last night.
Literally last night.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Literally
Yes,
last night.
and it is. I sent it to my publisher, and we had a long text conversation early in the morning, and he just thanked me, and he said, "This is powerful, and thank you. This needed to be said, and I can't believe this." And he was just, you know, blown away by it, and I was blown away that he was blown away. And I'm glad this was the cap that was needed for the whole album. It was one more that really was this emotional.
And to just kind of land in the moment
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, your full self-expression through classical piano is landing right in the moment of the full expression of Black Lives Matter.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's there. I don't struggle for words often,
Mm-hmm.
but I struggle for words on this. And a couple of things I noticed during that time was it was the first time that your dailies went quiet for days.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who had been a part of the audience to your composing, and you were very open about what this piece was, when it was almost like you knew, I knew, we knew that this was different. This piece was different. It was making different demands of you.
Yeah.
On every level, particularly, I would imagine, like emotional.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then in my parallel life, my what I do for a living, I'm a leadership coach. That's my title at this time. Mm-hmm. And that's been an evolution of my own journey. And I, as this white woman in my 50s in Toronto, as a leadership coach, watching what was happening at the leadership levels, this entire year seems to be about leadership, even more so, seeing what leaders are doing in a pandemic. And it's, everybody is stretched so thin. And I felt this obligation to put something out there before the timing was coincidental. I was in the dailies vacuum. I wasn't knowing about things like Blackout Tuesday, or that there was anything big and social afoot, as much as we can be social in social isolation. But
right.
I was like, I've got to come out before this guru podcast by Wondery that I'm in, before, like, when people land on this, if I end up in the media, if anything is going on, I need to have something that people can refer to for what my community that I'm building and creating the podcast is all about. And it was challenging because I had to take a look back on the best place to do it would be the Instagram feed for the podcast, and see the vanilla white roster of guests that I've had on.
Yeah.
And so I go into the dailies. I'm now writing in the present. I write this big piece about how I'm processing all of this. And I'm referring back to one of my most often referred to books in times of growth, Power versus Force. And I write up this whole thing. I'm like, well, I want the people who I'm engaging with to see the thought that I'm putting in here. I want them to understand the consciousness level that I'm wanting to choose proactively instead of in hindsight. And I put this great big long piece into my feed. I tag my regular cohorts, and I tag you, and go to bed. Didn't sleep the whole night. I was like, you obnoxious white woman. Thinking it's too, like, it's about me. And at the same time, there's feedback online to people saying, this is very tricky territory to go jumping into.
Mhm.
And so I have a restless night. I get up in the morning. You're 3 hours behind me.
Mhm.
The first thing that I do, I go downstairs to meditate. And then after I'm done that, I pull up Instagram and I see your Instagram story telling a story about how your mother, Cookie,
Mhm.
taught. Do you remember what you shared in that story?
Yeah, she taught me the protocol for dealing with police officers, and it was a serious thing, you know, as a kid. And she worked, like I said, she was an investigator, so she worked around law enforcement. But there was a whole protocol as to how, if you get pulled over, start with step one. Step one is, you know, make sure you don't reach in your glove box. Make sure you keep your hands where they're visible. Make sure you roll down your window this much, and, you know, talk to the officer with respect. Don't call him a cop, call him a police officer. You know, there's a banter, there's a whole protocol, step-by-step protocol that has to be followed. And the protocol is not, you know, if you're right or if you're wrong. This is just a protocol you follow to make sure that you get home, you know. So you know, I told that story, and it's unfortunate that, you know, as a kid I had to grow up in this environment where that was important for me to know how to deal with police officers in a way that wouldn't put myself at harm's way, you know. So she knew that there were corrupt police officers. She was around them all the time, and she said, yeah, there's a lot of bad apples, and you have to be safe.
Do you remember how old you were when you were first introduced to this idea?
Maybe about 13. Just, yeah, maybe about 13, 14. Yeah,
Yeah.
right before I started driving. So before I even knew how to drive, I knew how to be pulled over.
Yeah. So you're you know, I guess at the stage where you've got enough freedom to be walking your neighborhood
Right,
on your own, to be even seen separate from your parents and
right.
as a potential air, uh,
A,
air
a,
quoting
a
threat.
threat. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, this, this, uh, this makes me, I'm angry on your behalf.
Hmm.
So that night that after I tagged you, I had actually already checked you out thoroughly and decided I wanted to have you on the podcast. And I had started to write to you at one point saying, "Hey, you don't really know me, but I'm really interested in you." It's just one of those messages. And
Hmm.
I stopped it, and my intuition or my sensibilities were like, "Ah, it's not the right time just yet." So this was all
Right.
before any of this interaction.
Hmm.
And then so I watched your story on Instagram that morning. This was the morning after I'd written my piece, so this was like a Saturday overnight.
Hmm.
And then the very next thing I see were your comments back on the piece that I was challenged about having tagged you, and very uncertain that I was going to post it publicly.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't have it in front of me right now to refer to, but you um it you came out like, your reaction surprised me so much that I'm like ga- gasping over it right now.
Hmm.
Do you remember what that was about? And it's okay if you don't.
No, I don't exactly remember.
Yeah, you wrote, you first of all, you thanked me.
Hmm.
Secondly, you said this is exactly what I need to hear,
Hmm.
that you're willing to take a look at
Hmm.
where you can, how, stand with us, like
Hmm.
with me, a
Yeah.
Black man,
Hmm.
but also that because I made a list of all the areas that I could do better
Right.
within my current influence. And that's what
Hmm.
I think the bottom line of that whole exercise of even trying to write it out was realizing that we all have influence,
Right.
and influence starts at home. But even in a small business capacity, we all have customers, we all have people we're taking care of or serving or connecting with, and
Hmm.
there are ways that we can do much better
Right. Right.
to now, to literally share the microphone.
Yeah. Yeah. I just appreciated your words and what you said. I mean, to sit back and actually take a moment to reflect on yourself and say, in what ways can I make myself better um, for this group of people who are suffering right now, was to me very bold and very brave. And I had to thank you for that. Like most people will say, yeah, it's no big thing. I'm fine. What I'm doing is fine. No big deal. But to actually take that moment and it's just such a brave move. And I was, like I said, I had to respond to you. I had to let you know how much I was thankful for your bravery, especially in a moment like where we were.
I'm deeply appreciative of that, Charles. And at the same time, I feel like there's also like the cowardice involved, that's brave, right? Like that ultimately standing up for what you believe in. And I understand, having had to stand up for different things over time, there's always a level of courage that's required.
Right.
And I don't know that anyone ever feels brave while they're being brave.
Yeah,
Like if someone's
exactly.
saying I'm brave right now, they're not really
Yeah,
being
they're not really brave now. No way.
because they're not feeling it. They're
No. Yeah.
terrified. Right?
It comes with a certain amount of terror.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. And it's that edge. And so, after your feedback was enough to push me over the edge to say it would be okay, like, and on sort of a permission level, to put it out as it was.
Yeah.
And let it be about my process, and let it be about showing the people who I engage with, the type of thought that I don't do much on a knee-jerk reaction. I've lived to regret the times that I have. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, showing the process, especially as a coach, felt relevant in my little sphere, but also it was deeply affecting to know that you could receive it like that in the midst of where you were, relatively speaking.
Right. Yeah.
Let's go back to the George Floyd piece.
Okay.
So I'm more of a speaker and a writer. And so when someone says, tell your story, hear your voice, as a musician, not a vocalist, but as
Right.
a composer and pianist, what does that mean to you?
More than anything, it means that there's this thing where I feel like I have to open my chest up and let people see what's inside. And when they're able to see that vulnerability and what's inside, that's the voice. So in the case of this George Floyd piece, I mean, the beginning of it is just this it's basically me just beating the hell out of the piano because I'm just angry. And I have to let that was the first emotion. So the first thing you hear is me just banging on this piano. And as I was writing it, the beginning just kind of flowed. The beginning was easy. It was so easy. And this is where life kind of teaches me as I write. So having this angry moment was nothing. The next moment, I was just extremely saddened. Like someone died. And to dig into that emotion and start to tell that story was very difficult and very emotionally taxing. And the piece kind of develops into this kind of, you can hear like it sways. 1 minute it's very angry, next minute it's very sentimental, then it's angry again, then it's kind of thoughtful, and it's wondering, why has this been going, there's a moment where I really just said, I need to write a section that says, why has this been going on for so long, and why are we still here? And that section kind of spilled out, and maybe it's 30 seconds or something of me just saying that. And then it gets angry again. So as you hear, I'm kind of on this roller coaster of emotions throughout this whole piece and throughout writing it. I think that my voice, like I'm not a writer. I'm not a words person. Words to me are so complicated, but sound makes sense to me. So that's what it is to me telling things through my voice, through the piano.
and then piecing it together, I'm thinking of a couple of things here. One is that this story is like George Floyd has become a more than George Floyd, he's become a metaphor, a symbol
Mm-hmm.
of so many others before him
Right. Correct.
and since.
Mm-hmm. Correct. We're still there.
We're still there, and we're still there. Has it even been a month yet? I think it's almost a month. I'd have to,
Yeah.
actually, I think it was just over a month. I think it was May
Yeah.
10th.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then your process, as I'm listening to you describe the anger, the frustration, the sadness, that's like the grieving process
Yes.
balled in there.
Mm-hmm.
What can we learn from anger being the easy one? What was in that for you? Have you had a chance to even reflect? It's so fresh.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I've shared with my friends who are protesting, and that anger is easy. The emotion of anger is very easy. It's very easy to be angry and respond to that emotion. But if you take that moment to get past the anger and get to the next emotion, that one is going to be more difficult, but it will be more rewarding if you address it. Sorrow. I was very sad, and I had to have that led to amazing conversations with friends, with family, and saying, you know what, I'm very sad about this, guys. What do we do? I spent literally 3 days, and everyone I would talk to, the first thing I would ask is, how do we fix this? What do we do? How do we fix it? What do we do? And that to me was a better question than me going out and rioting and breaking stuff. I mean, it's easy to break stuff, but to ask the real questions that really matter and sit down with intelligent people and start a conversation about how do we fix this problem that we're going with. I think it's much more difficult, and it's much more empowering to get to that resolve than to just, kind of explode.
There's It's like at the same time you're making something, you're making the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were you hearing in your circles when you were asking these questions, if you don't mind me?
Yeah,
You're talking about so much more
this
than
is,
music here.
yeah, this is great. This is the conversation, though. This is the conversation that I hope for. One of the things we spoke about, which really, for me, kind of touched home, was just I'll put it like this. I had a conversation with a guy that I know from Instagram. He's a white male from Santa Monica, and he was asking about what is equality. And I had to kind of list, he knows me as a pianist. He's also a pianist. And I had to kind of break it down for him a little bit and kind of explain where the inequality in this country has existed. It's very difficult to see. Like I said, it's under the surface. It's not on the surface. It is on the surface because, yes, cops do kill Black people. Yes, it is on the surface. But the larger majority of it is like an iceberg, and it's completely under the surface, and you can't see it. And I explained to him how my sister, I went to Catholic school all the way up until 5th grade. We got kicked out of the Catholic school because my sister decided to grab the bronze crayon instead of the peach crayon to paint Jesus. Let's color everyone. No, everyone, let's color Jesus. She grabbed the bronze one, and that my parents were called up to the school, and there was a whole thing, and we went to public school next year.
Because your sister saw Jesus to be like her.
Yeah. She read the Bible, Skin of Bronze, and she picked up the bronze crayon. And that, it just made sense to her. She's a very logical person. It made so much sense to her. And it was, like I said, a big thing. Like, it was a whole
I can
meetings and
even to, I think about your sister, I think about you because that change impacted you, but for your
yeah,
parents,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that heartbreaking.
yeah. And to be paying these guys, to be paying for private schools. They wanted us to have a better education, so they wanted to pay for private schools, and we got kicked out of private schools for that. To me, it seems senseless, completely senseless. Um, but so many things like that have occurred throughout my life that have been very, like I say, under the surface attacks. And I had to explain this to this guy. And in a way, I think he got it. But then in another way, I think he didn't get it. He thought I was at an advantage because he says, well, you had to struggle and it taught you how to fight harder. And then, you went on tour with Rhianna. I'm saying, but imagine if I did not have the struggle. Imagine where I would have been. I would have been, that may look like a 10 to you, but it looks like a 5 to me.
Well, I don't think it's fair to it. Oh, I know there's a word for it. And one word that comes to mind is whitewash. And I'll be the one to say it in this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. That's totally whitewashing your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's also there is a life there where that young girl or that young boy becomes angry and resentful
Right.
and acts out in a different way that precludes them from the level of success that you've had.
Exactly.
And that person may not, that could say a whole lot about you, but it could also say about a lot about the support structure and family that you had in place that
Yeah.
not everybody has access to.
Right.
um when and you could have had the support structure and
It still could have,
still
went left. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Then and to negate the, I don't want to negate the experience because you've been successful, but I'm also curious in your success, where you've played out in professionally, has that under the surface racism been there as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have been, even as professional, as successful as I have been, I've even been to places. One of my things I always get is kicked off of pianos in public spaces. Like if there's a piano at a hotel, if I sit down and play it, there's a problem immediately. Sir, we can't have you playing the piano, this and that and the other. And then I start playing Beethoven and they kind of go, oh, well, okay. So it's always, even walking into piano stores, it's been that way throughout my entire life. I actually look forward to it now. I say, well, they're going to give me the crappy stuff first, and then they're going to have me play the expensive stuff in the back. And it usually plays out that way. So there's a certain expectation because of what the world has become. There's a certain way that I approach everything. I understand that I'm not going to be treated fairly at first, but I've put in the time that you're going to recognize me. You're going to have to see me. You're going to have to see that there is a talent and there's a skill and there's an ability that's larger than your preconceived racial bias. You're going to be like, oh, well, doesn't matter. Let me show him to the good stuff.
Mm.
And it's happened that way so many times. So many times. I even had in Ireland, I've had a guy at a hotel take the lid of the piano and try to slam it down on my hands. And I've had to pull one of these just to make sure I'm protecting my hands. It's hard. It's rough, but you just know, I know who I am. And that's very powerful. I know my power. I know my strength. I know what I possess. I know that I'm a good person. No matter who you are, what color you are, you could be purple and an alien. I'm still going to be good to you because you belong, because you're alive right now. And that's more important, is that we have more similarities than we have differences. And to me, I can see that. And I've always seen that. And that's more important than then, like I said, our differences, we're so similar. We're just one race.
And I mean, just listening to you, just the size of your heart. And I've had the benefit of watching, because when people are creating, they're at their most vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, they're most exposed. And the act of, even the act of generosity, say, of the piano player. And I hope to have a chance to see you play a lobby
Yeah.
piano
I hope so.
sometime
Yeah.
before too many years pass. But I have a very close friend. Her name is Julie Min. She is a classical pianist, and we've traveled together. And we were in Telluride, Colorado, for an event, and there was a piano in the restaurant that we were in, and Julie is a tiny Asian woman, and the pianos, you know, dwarf
Massive.
her. And she goes to sit down at the piano, and it's almost like there's just a call. If there's a piano there, she's going to play it. So I imagine it's got to be
Yeah.
the same for you.
Absolutely.
And you're sharing a piece of your heart every single time.
Every time. Yeah.
So what is next for you, Charles? You've actually, before we go to what's next, I'm so curious. The pandemic, it had to have disrupted your professional life. Were you
Oh,
playing,
wow.
touring? You're in
Yes.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'm in Las Vegas. Yes. And I had 3 tours. I had South by Southwest booked already. I had another tour called High School Nation that was booked. And there was a third one. Oh, it was a couple one-offs. But I had work, and it all, no festivals, of course. All that stuff fizzled away. Coachella fizzled away. So in a way, it affected me as far as work. But then in another way, it was a benefit because it gave me the time and space to continue writing and doing my own thing.
Yeah, that shift from sort of that being that output. And were you going to tour on your own, or were you with groups,
With other artists? Yeah, with
other
other artists.
artists?
Yeah.
So the pandemic very much aligned for you
Right. Yeah.
to do what you've been doing. And so as things are slowly opening up, hopefully some of that will come back. But now you have this album. What's the journey from here?
Well, the writing is done, which is the first step. Right now, everything is being transcribed. So now I have it on paper. And then I go into maybe a 2-week study of everything that I've written. And then we go in, we do recordings, and we record it on a grand piano, and then, mix, master, all of that stuff. I am going through a rebranding right now with my publisher, which is very exciting. Unfortunately, my parents gave me Charles Wilson, and there's a million of those. Thanks, Dad. But
At least 2 other piano players.
yeah, at least 2 others. So now I'm going through a whole rebranding process, which is always fun for me because there's something about having a new identity. For me, there's something about having a new identity. It's like you can create this identity however you want it. Now the rules are whatever you want the rules to be. So going through that process as well. And then probably doing a series of very small shows, maybe 10-person max sort of things. And just starting the tour in a very small way. And as the world opens up, the tours can get bigger and bigger.
That is so exciting.
Yeah.
And even to backtrack, I think one of the surprising pieces of watching you compose is that when you write a piece, you write it, but then you have to learn to play it.
Yeah.
And then
I don't know why I do. I always say when I'm writing, I say, why do I do this to myself? I write a bunch of stuff I can't necessarily play yet.
Yeah, so, and then play it at tempo, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
The waltz you
saw
us.
yeah, this tempo, and then I took it up 5 more BPM and 5 more and 5 more. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so you have a huge, it's like a huge workout to get these pieces from their written state, given that, I'll date this for everyone. I'm going to publish it as quickly as I can, but Wednesday, June 17th. So you finished the George Floyd piece last night and
yes,
posted it in the creatives workshop this morning.
right,
So that's where you are on that one.
right.
So now it's time to get to work in order to
The
record.
real work starts now. Everything else was kind of fluff. Now the real work, like hours and hours and hours of studying, 4 measures at a time, that sort of deal. Yeah.
What I get from listening to you, and it is part of the context of some of the education we've had recently, is the level of professionalism. And in the workshop, there's the way that Seth Godin, he opposes professionalism, being a pro with being a hack.
Right.
And not in a judgmental way. A hack is something who could be quite neutral,
Yeah.
but comes in and hacks the thing to make the money and maybe move on.
Mm-hmm.
And the professional is someone who shows up every day, drip by drip by drip. And it
Right.
certainly has opened my eyes to what showing up can and could, and I will say should look like
Mm-hmm.
as a pro.
Right.
Which I grapple with in my work.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot churning around. Getting it out every day is something very different.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult.
Before we start to wrap, what would you say? What keeps you a pro? What helps you to know when you say, I'm going to show up for 100 days, I'm going to show up. And now you're going to go into the studio and you're a pro.
Yeah. The audience, the people. The people are so important. Like I don't do this for myself. I do this for everyone but myself. And that's what keeps me very professional, is the fact that I know that I'm servicing. There's something about giving that's very essential for my life. Like the feeling of, I know I gave something to someone. I know that they're on the receiving end of this. And maybe this could be something that helped them when they needed it most. And, music is medicine. I consider myself a doctor. I consider myself a doctor better than other doctors. They wait till you're broken. I can fix you while you're still there. So it's that factor that keeps me going and keeps me motivated and keeps me professional, to make sure I show up every day, because it's important for someone out there that needs what I have to offer.
And then while you're doing this in service, it's generous leadership, it's empathetic leadership. I've seen and you've shared how much it consumes of you to be able to create at this level. How do you support yourself and take care of yourself while you're doing all of this?
Oh, well, I take care of myself pretty well. I mean, I'm very much about physical fitness. I take care of myself in that way. I also meditate. Like I make sure that my mind and my spirit all are in a great space, especially before I write. Like I have to make sure that I'm grounded in order to tell a story that's grounded. So, that's the thing that's very important, is making sure physically I'm in a great space, spiritually I'm in a great space, and that all kind of contributes in it to the work. Like I think that's what helps me work in a better way, is the balance and the other parts of my life.
Did you learn that piece of it on your own through experience, or did someone bring you that? Was that part of what you were taught by your teachers or your mom? How
And
did you pick that up?
a little bit of both. My teacher was very, very, very a grounded man. I mean, very extremely even keeled, a disciplinarian, a hard ass at times, but even keeled. And throughout my life, I've had to find my own ways of finding balance. And that's one of my favorite things is to talk about is balance. I think balance is the most important thing for us as human beings, is to find where your life kind of has its spot, the sweet spot. When you find the sweet spot, just stay in the sweet spot.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's so, so, so important, especially when you're putting stuff out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder for, we're looking at times moving forward where I think as human beings, and as, I consider you a leader. You're a leader in your field. You're leading in, with your music.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone is being asked to, to think on a different level, to behave on a different level. And I would even said that just after the pandemic.
Right.
Never mind everything, because suddenly no instant gratification. You have to stay at home for months to get the desired result. Society,
exactly,
sit your ass down, right?
yeah,
Like,
right,
still mind blowing. I'm
yeah,
look forward to being able to explore that in hindsight,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
because we don't really know the end of the story yet.
yeah.
But even more so on the social systemic issues
Mm-hmm.
of racism, of toxic leadership, and it's all sadly intertwined with politics, but
Mm-hmm.
core human being level stuff.
Right.
You're being asked to think more, to become more present and conscious, and to express more.
Mm-hmm.
And that is uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So there's a self-care piece that is necessary.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. So Charles, rebranding.
Mm-hmm.
Rebranding, can I infer from that there may be a name change coming?
It definitely is a name change coming.
I was teasing, we spoke on the phone last week, and I was teasing you saying, so after we record, you'll have to get back to me with your new handle, like artist or the pianist.
Yep.
You're obviously in a process for that right now, ahead of, this is a part of you going out on your own.
Right.
It wouldn't be needed if you were staying as a supporting piece.
Right.
It's exciting. It's uncomfortable.
Very exciting. Yeah, all of those things. Yeah.
What I'll do is, when you're through that process, I'll find out we'll stay in communication, but I want to put this out there because I think the world needs to hear from you sooner than your album. I would like the world to hear from you right now, in this moment.
Right.
And thank you so much for introducing me to, I've always understood that music has transformative power and healing power, but I've never been witness to the creation of new music. And it has been just awe-inspiring. I feel very privileged and very grateful to have been witness to what you've been creating.
Oh, thank you so much. I thank you for your support. Like it means nothing without the people that support it and check the dailies and give me great feedback.
Well, and it's also, I will say, my honor to have you on here to help to amplify your voice on all of the issues. And I look forward to, I already know I want to have you back.
Awesome.
to check in and to share your journey and your worldview as we go through what are hopefully some very defining, changing times.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been so cool. Yes.
Charles, where do you want people to find you online?
You can find me on Instagram. That's at Wilson Charles Official. And at Patreon, which is patreon.com/Wilson Charles.
And if any of that changes in your rebranding, I'll be sure to keep the episode and the links and everything up to date.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
It's gonna change. It's gonna change. Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.